Hey everybody, we're back with Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto, walking through the first movement as we've been doing, and focusing mainly on this beautiful melody here. I don't care who you are, you have to admit that that's just absolutely heart-wrenchingly beautiful. The second time it gets restated, a couple measures later, is with octaves. So now instead of this, it's this. So a little bit more impassioned, a little stronger. Then it gets developed by Rachmaninoff here on the next page. And then even more. And then you think it's going to climax, but it doesn't, and he brings it back with this little tease, which builds up even more. And now where is it going to go? But you guessed it, back to the main melody, and now restated in so much more motion, movement, dynamism, and glory. I can't tell you how much I loved that when I first heard it. I would have been 13 years old, so I was in 7th grade. You know, I was a teenager. This thing grabbed me by the heart, and I fell just right in love with it. I just wrote all my own angst and love sickness into it, and it's just one of those pieces that I've never gotten tired of, and most audiences don't get tired of it. That's why this gets performed in concert halls all over the place. Every year, some symphony orchestra in any major town is going to have a performance of this piece, probably. It's one of those classical favorites that everybody loves. So, I can't remember what was popular at the time, probably, but I just didn't care. Like Green Day was big, probably The Offspring, some other bands like that. I just couldn't relate. I was in love with this, and still am. I think this has kind of stood the test of time a little bit better than those bands. Sorry, guys. I think I'm right. But anyway, let's talk about why this has stood the test of time and why this is so great. Well, let's look at one hand at a time, starting with the right. Like I said before, the melody is now up higher. It's more urgent, and it stands out, importantly, in this higher register above the rest of the orchestra, where you imagine all these beautiful strings and horns doing these warm kind of chords underneath. So this needs to project, because this is the showcase. The pianist is the show-off subject of this piece, right? So it has to be heard. Now, we have this going on. In addition to the melody, we have these little tones in between. So there's no real rhyme or reason to those, and when you put them together as chords, it'd be like this. They don't sound particularly nice. Like, ugh. Ugh. This is very, very modern, and we have to remember this piece was written in the turn of the century, 1901 is when it was published, and so we've come out of sort of the tradition of classicism and romanticism, which would have had very sort of, for lack of a better term for lay people, just kind of normal sounding chords that make sense. Now we're dealing with the chromatic scale, and Rachmaninoff loved chromaticism. I'll give you an example of it. This is a normal major scale in C major. 8 tones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now, chromaticism includes all of the tones in between. On a piano, these are the black keys. Now, Rachmaninoff loved playing with this, as any composer of the modern age would have. Rachmaninoff wanted to keep the sense of classical melody in the traditional sense, but he was now going to pack it full of chromatic tones, which we get a treat of when we hear this. It's just, Beethoven would never have written something like that. And it's so beautiful. It almost sounds like movie music, right? Also, these little bits in between, it gives this feeling of movement and dynamism and brilliance of color, almost like if you were in a coral reef and you just saw all these different fish, schools of fish swarming around. It's just this overwhelming sense of beauty that you get. So it's just sparkling, it's glittering, it's moving. Now let's talk about the left hand. The left hand, of course, in a Rachmaninoff piece is never going to be straightforward because he was such a good pianist, he couldn't just stand to have his left hand sit and do something like this. He had to do this. Lots of chromaticism. Oh, let's listen to this. Top notes. All those top notes are deliberately brought out for a reason, and he even writes a little line above them to make sure that the pianist remembers to highlight them. They're there for the harmonic purpose of blending in with this melody. Hear that? So, that's an illustration of just another layer to bring out. That if you're just playing it mechanically like a player piano, it doesn't stand out. But if you're playing it like a human being and trying to make it sing the way Rachmaninoff would, it would sound like this. Let's remind ourselves that Rachmaninoff was highly inspired by vocal singing music. So he wanted all of his phrases in music, he said, had to have a beginning and a middle and an end, where the middle is the high point, usually around 3/4 of the way through. You climax the phrase and then draw it back. So in this case, it would be la, 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 right? So the left hand has to obey that too. It can't be... It has to build up and then come back, and this creates this swirling effect like a snow globe almost. And it ends kind of quiet. So, when we put these together, it's astonishingly beautiful. I'm going to play this from the build-up that leads into it, so you guys can hear it all together in its glory. And remember to listen for those left-hand thumb notes that come out, the main melody and the little supporting, and how they come together, you know. It's gorgeous. So, here we go. Hopefully you'll see why I love it so much. Again, can't imagine too many melodies that are more beautiful than that. It's my privilege to play them now after wanting to learn this piece since I was 13 and falling right in love with it. So I'm really happy to share it with you. I'm glad you're here, and we'll see you on the next one.